The summer heat shimmered like a mirage over Maple Grove's quiet suburban landscape, but nothing was quiet inside Sarah Rodriguez's weathered farmhouse. Her fingers traced the decades-old property survey spread across the kitchen table, a map that would soon become her weapon of choice in a battle that had been brewing for years. Mark and Linda Thompson had always been the type of neighbors who believed money could solve everything. Their gleaming two-story colonial, with its immaculate landscaping and ostentatious in-ground pool, stood in stark contrast to Sarah's century-old farmhouse, a legacy passed down through 3 generations of her family. What they didn't know was that Sarah wasn't just another pushover homeowner they could intimidate. The dispute had started innocently enough. 5 years ago, the Thompsons had begun encroaching on what Sarah knew was her family's land. A few feet here, a few feet there, slowly pushing their manicured lawn and expensive landscaping beyond the original property lines. Most people would have ignored it, but not Sarah. Her grandfather had fought too hard for this land during the Great Depression, and every inch meant something. It was the pool that finally pushed her over the edge. When the Thompsons completed their elaborate backyard renovation last summer, Sarah knew something wasn't right. The massive concrete structure seemed to stretch beyond what should have been possible, creeping closer and closer to what she knew was the true property boundary. She remembered the day she first confronted Mark Thompson. He was washing his Mercedes in the driveway, looking pristine in his pressed polo shirt and designer sunglasses. "Excuse me," Sarah had called out, her voice steady but firm. "I think your pool might be on my property." Mark had laughed, a short, dismissive bark that made Sarah's blood boil. "Listen," he'd said, not even bothering to look up from his car. "We had surveys done. Everything's perfectly legal." But Sarah knew better. The survey in her hands told a different story. A story etched in ink and official measurements that predated the Thompsons' arrival in the neighborhood by decades. What followed was a meticulously planned investigation. Sarah spent weeks gathering evidence. Old property records from the county office, photographs documenting the gradual encroachment, conversations with elderly neighbors who remember the original land divisions. She hired a professional surveyor, Tom Martinez, a man known for his precision and integrity. Tom's report confirmed everything Sarah suspected. Not only was a significant portion of the Thompsons' pool built on her property, but they had also extended their fence line by nearly 15 feet beyond the legal boundary. The monetary value was substantial. We're talking about thousands of square feet of prime suburban real estate. The Thompsons had money. They had connections. Linda worked as a real estate attorney, and Mark was a senior executive at a local development firm. They were used to getting their way, used to bulldozing over anyone who stood in their path. But they had never met Sarah Rodriguez. Sarah wasn't wealthy. She worked as a high school history teacher, supplementing her income by managing a small organic farm on the family property. She lived modestly, drove an old pickup truck, and had a reputation in the community for being quietly formidable. Her students knew her as the teacher who never backed down from a challenge, who could silence a rowdy classroom with just a look. The day she filed the initial legal documents was calm and crisp. The county clerk looked surprised when Sarah walked in, meticulously organized files tucked under her arm. "I need to file a property dispute," she said, her voice clear and unwavering. Little did the Thompsons know, this was more than just a property line dispute. This was about respect, about legacy, about standing up for what was rightfully hers. The legal battle was about to begin, and Sarah Rodriguez was ready for war. The first official communication from the Thompsons' attorney arrived on a Tuesday morning. Sarah found the certified letter wedged between her mailbox and its post, the crisp white envelope standing out sharply against the weathered wooden post. Her hands were still dusty from morning chores when she broke the seal, her classroom-honed ability to remain calm washing over her like a protective shield. "Cease and desist," the letter demanded. Linda Thompson's law firm letterhead was a statement in itself. Embossed cream paper, expensive typography that screamed privilege. They were threatening Sarah with legal action if she continued to challenge their property boundaries, claiming her survey was demonstrably incorrect and that she was causing undue emotional distress to the neighborhood. Sarah couldn't help but laugh. Undue emotional distress? She thought about her grandfather, who had worked this land during the Dust Bowl, who had fought to keep every square inch of their family property. What would he say about these suburban lawyers and their threats? Her first call was to her own attorney, Robert Grayson, a local lawyer who had known her family for years. Rob was semi-retired, but he took cases that mattered. When Sarah spread her documents across his office desk, his bushy eyebrows rose with interest. "They made a mistake," Rob said, shuffling through the original land survey, the new professional survey, and the historical property records. A significant mistake. The Thompsons were banking on intimidation. Their initial legal strategy was clear: overwhelm Sarah with legal jargon, threaten costly litigation, make her believe fighting wasn't worth the effort. What they didn't understand was that Sarah Rodriguez wasn't easily intimidated. Her preparation was meticulous. Each evening after teaching, grading papers spread across her kitchen table, she would work on the case, old photographs, county records, conversations with longtime neighborhood residents who remembered the original land divisions. She built a timeline, a narrative that would prove not just her legal right, but the historical integrity of her claim. The local community watched with a mixture of curiosity and respect. In a neighborhood increasingly dominated by new money and aggressive development, Sarah represented something different. A connection to the area's agricultural roots, a stubborn dedication to truth. Mark Thompson tried to approach her one Saturday, hoping to resolve the matter neighborly. He caught her loading hay into her truck, his designer loafers looking painfully out of place on the dusty farm ground. "This doesn't have to get ugly," he said, attempting a conciliatory tone. Sarah didn't even turn to face him fully. "Then don't make it ugly," she responded, her voice as dry as the summer grass. Her strategy was simple but powerful. She wasn't just fighting for a few feet of land. She was fighting for a principle, the idea that history and truth matter more than money and influence. Rob Grayson prepared the countersuit with the precision of a surgeon. Each document was a carefully placed surgical instrument designed to expose the fundamental flaws in the Thompsons' position. They had overreached, and now they would face the consequences. The first court date was set. Sarah could feel the anticipation building, not just in herself, but in the whispers of the community. This was more than a property dispute. This was a David versus Goliath story unfolding in real time, with property lines and local pride hanging in the balance. As she stood in her farmhouse that evening, watching the sunset paint the land her family had worked for generations, Sarah knew one thing with absolute certainty. She would not back down. Not now. Not ever. The legal battle was about to enter its most critical phase. The county courthouse stood like a sentinel of justice, its limestone facade weathered by decades of local disputes and personal dramas. Sarah arrived early, her navy blue blazer pressed, her family's original property documents secured in a worn leather portfolio that had belonged to her grandfather. The courtroom buzzed with an unexpected energy. Local farmers, longtime residents, and a scattering of curious onlookers filled the wooden benches. Mark and Linda Thompson sat on the opposite side, Linda in a perfectly tailored gray suit, Mark with a smartphone discreetly tucked beside him. A stark contrast to Sarah's simple, no-nonsense appearance. Judge Elena Ramirez was known for her no-nonsense approach. She had grown up in the same county and understood the delicate balance between new development and historical land rights. As she adjusted her glasses and reviewed the initial documents, Sarah could see a hint of intrigue in her expression. Robert Grayson began their presentation with a masterful stroke. Instead of diving immediately into legal technicalities, he painted a broader picture. He spoke of Sarah's family history, 3 generations who had worked this land, paid taxes, maintained its boundaries. He presented historical maps, original surveys, and a meticulously documented timeline of the property's history. The Thompsons' attorney, a slick man in an expensive suit named Derek Holloway, tried to interrupt several times. Relevance? He would challenge, his voice dripping with condescension. But Judge Ramirez silenced him with a sharp look. "Continue," she told Rob. The first bombshell came when Rob introduced the most recent professional survey. Large architectural renderings were projected onto the courtroom wall, showing precisely how the Thompsons' pool extended beyond their legal property line. The blue water of the pool seemed to mock them, a visual representation of their overreach. Linda Thompson's perfectly composed facade began to crack. Mark shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his fingers nervously tapping against his designer watch. Sarah's moment came when she was called to testify. She spoke clearly, without emotion, presenting facts with the same methodical approach she used when teaching history to her high school students. She described her grandfather's stories about the land, the original boundaries, the gradual encroachment she had documented. "This isn't about money," she stated firmly. "This is about preserving the truth of our family's history." The courtroom fell silent. Derek Holloway's cross-examination was aggressive. He tried to paint Sarah as a troublemaker, someone trying to disrupt a peaceful neighborhood. He suggested her claims were motivated by financial gain. Rob Grayson was ready. He produced additional evidence, communications from the Thompsons that demonstrated their awareness of the potential boundary issues. Emails, surveyors' preliminary notes. Each document was another nail in their legal coffin. The most surprising moment came when Tom Martinez, the professional surveyor, took the stand. His testimony was devastating to the Thompsons' case. Not only did he confirm Sarah's claims, but he also revealed that the Thompsons had ignored earlier, unofficial warnings about their property line. During a brief recess, the tension was palpable. The Thompsons huddled with their attorney, their earlier confidence replaced by visible anxiety. Sarah sat quietly, her hands folded, a sense of calm surrounding her. As the hearing continued, it became clear that this was more than a simple property dispute. It was a referendum on community values, on the tension between new money and historical roots, between aggressive development and respect for established boundaries. Judge Ramirez listened intently, her expression unreadable. But those who knew her understood that she was carefully weighing every piece of evidence, every testimony. The first day of the hearing was drawing to a close. The initial battle lines had been drawn, and Sarah Rodriguez had made it clear she was not backing down. The real fight was just beginning. The weeks following the first court hearing transformed Sarah's life into a delicate dance of legal maneuvering and community speculation. Her high school students whispered about the property battle between their history teacher and the most prominent family in their suburban neighborhood. Some saw her as a local hero. Others viewed her as a troublemaker disrupting the carefully manicured peace of Maple Grove. It was during this time that an unexpected ally emerged, Margaret Reynolds, the 87-year-old local historian who had lived in the area her entire life. She contacted Sarah after hearing about the court case, her weathered hands clutching a collection of old documents that would change everything. "I think you need to see these," Margaret said during their first meeting, spreading out a series of black and white photographs and yellowed property records across Sarah's kitchen table. The documents told a story far more complex than anyone had anticipated. They revealed that the land boundary dispute wasn't just about a few feet of property. It was about a decades-old land swap that had never been properly documented. Margaret's meticulously preserved records showed that Sarah's grandfather had an informal agreement with the previous owners of the Thompson property, an agreement that predated modern property regulations. Rob Grayson's eyes widened when Sarah brought the documents to his office. "This changes everything," he muttered, carefully examining each page. The Thompsons were about to be blindsided. As the legal preparation continued, Sarah discovered something else. Her investigation into the property's history revealed that Mark Thompson's real estate development company had been quietly purchasing and redeveloping properties in the area, often pushing legal boundaries to maximize profit. The pool encroachment wasn't just a mistake. It was potentially part of a larger pattern. Linda Thompson's professional facade began to crack under the pressure. Rumors circulated that her law firm was distancing itself from the case, sensing the potential for a major embarrassment. Mark became increasingly agitated, his once confident demeanor replaced by a nervous energy that permeated their household. The next court session would be the turning point. Sarah spent her evenings preparing, spreading documents across her farmhouse kitchen table. Her students noticed a change in her, a quiet determination that seemed to radiate from her very being. She wasn't just fighting a legal battle, she was preserving a piece of her family's legacy. The night before the crucial hearing, Sarah discovered an old box in her grandfather's study, a room she rarely entered. Inside, she found a series of handwritten notes and sketches that provided even more context to the land's history. Her grandfather had been more than just a farmer. He had been a careful documentarian of every inch of their property. One particular document caught her eye. A hand-drawn map dated 1952 showed property lines that were subtly different from the modern surveys. It was another piece of the puzzle, another weapon in her legal arsenal. Rob Grayson called her the morning of the hearing, his voice filled with a mixture of excitement and caution. "Are you ready?" he asked. Sarah looked out over the land her family had worked for generations. The morning mist was lifting, revealing the true contours of a landscape that held secrets far deeper than anyone had imagined. "I was born ready," she replied. The final confrontation was about to begin. The Thompsons thought they were dealing with a simple property dispute. They had no idea what was coming. This was about to become more than a legal battle. This was about to become a reckoning. The final hearing was nothing like anyone expected. Judge Elena Ramirez entered the courtroom with a gravity that immediately silenced the murmurs. The accumulated evidence, Sarah's meticulously preserved documents, Margaret Reynolds' historical records, and the startling revelations about the land's complex history, created an atmosphere thick with anticipation. Mark Thompson had lost his characteristic swagger. His tailored suit now seemed ill-fitting, a costume that no longer concealed the growing desperation beneath. Linda sat rigidly beside him, her legal expertise seemingly evaporating under the weight of mounting evidence. Rob Grayson presented the final pieces of the puzzle with the precision of a master storyteller. The hand-drawn map from 1952, the informal land agreements, the documented history of gradual encroachment. Each piece fell into place like a perfectly constructed puzzle. But it was more than just a legal argument. It was a narrative of community, of family, of respect for historical boundaries. The bombshell came when additional documentation revealed that Mark Thompson's development company had a pattern of similar boundary disputes in other neighborhoods. What had begun as a local property line argument had transformed into an expose of questionable business practices. "This isn't just about a few feet of land," Rob argued, his voice filling the courtroom. "This is about integrity, about respecting the history of this community." Judge Ramirez's decision was swift and decisive. Not only would the Thompsons need to remove the portion of their pool that extended onto Sarah's property, but they would also be required to pay significant restitution. The court mandated that they restore the original property line and compensate Sarah for the unauthorized use of her land. But the victory was about more than legal vindication. As the verdict was read, Sarah felt something deeper than triumph. She thought of her grandfather, of the generations who had worked this land, who had maintained its boundaries with dignity and respect. This wasn't just a win for her. It was a win for every small landowner who had ever been steamrolled by those with more money and influence. The local community responded with an unexpected outpouring of support. Neighbors who had previously been silent came forward with their own stories of boundary disputes, of quiet resistance against aggressive development. Sarah became an unexpected hero, not through confrontation, but through methodical, principled resistance. In the weeks that followed, the Thompsons put their house on the market. The once proud symbol of their suburban success became a testament to their downfall. Mark's development company faced increased scrutiny, with local authorities taking a closer look at their past projects. Sarah continued teaching, continued farming, but something had changed. She had discovered a strength she didn't know she possessed, a quiet, immovable force that could stand up against seemingly insurmountable odds. The pool that had started it all became a symbol, a reminder that sometimes the most powerful weapon is the truth, carefully preserved and meticulously presented. As summer turned to fall, Sarah stood on her family's land, looking out over the property her grandfather had loved. The boundary was clear now, not just on paper, but in reality. She had done more than win a legal battle. She had honored a legacy. And in Maple Grove, they would tell their story for years to come. The story of the history teacher who took on the neighborhood's most powerful family and won.